Hey, family, Reverend Russ here. Thank you so much for getting on to Ministry Pivot again. I'm super excited about this episode. I say it all the time, but I really am excited about all of the episodes that we've been able to do. Don't forget to visit ministrypivot.com. Don't forget to download the articles. Don't forget to look at the other conversations. Don't forget to download the show notes. Please don't forget to subscribe so that you can get the emails that we send out and notifications. Again, super excited about this episode today. We're going to be talking about finances. We're going to be talking about getting your finances together, but also we're going to be talking about thinking through what are the steps and the things you need to make in order to be successful, pivots you need to be successful in for your finances today. And I have none other than one of my brothers, one of my friends, one of my mentors, Reverend Loxley O'Connor. He's the CFO at Kingdom Fellowship AME Church. Shout out to our pastor, Pastor Watley. But Reverend Loxley and I talked through finances, talked through some pivots that he made in his life financially, but also talked through some steps that churches and leaders need to make as they think through this season financially. So without talking about it more, let's go ahead to my conversation with Reverend Loxley. Reverend Loxley, man, thank you so much for getting on Ministry Pivot today. Super honored to have you on Ministry Pivot. You are a friend, you're a brother, you're a mentor. You are just super awesome in our life. And I wanted to make sure that the world was able to hear about Reverend Loxley O'Connor. But I did a little bit of your bio in the beginning. But if you wouldn't mind, could you share with those who are watching, those who are listening, a little bit more about your finance background, who Reverend Loxley O'Connor is? Again, I did it some justice, but I know I didn't hit it the way I should have. Thanks again for being on.
Thank you, man, for having me. I enjoy talking with you and just enjoy just getting to know you and see all that God is doing in your life. And for Ministry Pivot, how this has grown in such a short period of time. That the pivot is the right word for the time in which we live. My background is covered. I've covered a 40-year period of financial growth and background. I came out of Howard in 1983 and joined the firm of Coopers and Lybrand that became PricewaterhouseCoopers in the end. And I had a 13-year career there. First 10 years was in the audit field, and in the audit group, I served a number of clients, including Howard, my alma mater. I had a very strong, heavy concentration in the real estate group, working with persons who were doing real estate investment trusts. One of the first and largest real estate investment trust that was put together back in the day, something called Oxford, that was for $300 million, that owned rental properties across the country, was one of my clients. And at that time, they were trading what they call beneficial assignment certificates. You didn't have stocks, but you could buy these beneficial assignment certificates. And I had a great pleasure of working with that group. And then, after really investing on the side, because I'm into this whole concept of the multiple streams of income. So, we bought into a laundromat, and made a decision to pivot from buying a move-up house to buying in the laundromat business. That itself grew and just blew up. It became much bigger than I had anticipated, because it went well, and we had multiple stores we owned. And as I was building out one of those stores, it just required more and more of my attention. So I ultimately left the firm in '97 and worked the next 13 years, pretty much another 13 years solely as an entrepreneur, doing a number of things, real estate investing, laundromat, doing amusement, arcade stuff, all of that. And as I did that and kind of spread, what I own, commercial buildings, so forth, um, you know, time went on and felt drawn by the Lord really to go to seminars. I was in seminary, I went to seminary, and went more because I wanted to learn more about the Lord and just build my relationship with Him. Never had a real desire to be on the ministry clergy side, but just really to just know the Lord, walk more with Him, understand more the principles of faith and faith in action, and ultimately um, graduated. Started doing mission trips and doing work overseas. Develop, with a couple of my seminary um, classmates. And we started a mission organization and a charity. And we started traveling to Jamaica, to Zimbabwe, to Ghana, and all of them. And in that, funding out of our work and out of our individual pockets what we're doing. So all of it came together as time went on, until I finally, at one point, came on board as a CFO at Reed and now at Kingdom, and that's been the last 13 years. So I've had these 13-year slots in these spots, doing increasingly more stuff. And in that time, I've consulted with a number of organizations. I've talked about the work I recently did in the pandemic with these two Black farmers, fifth generation farmers, who wanted to had the opportunity to buy a rice mill. They got the opportunity, they got the contract, but had not put together a business plan. So somebody called my name, they came, and we spent the next 6 months putting together packages and so forth that they were able to use, get the financing they need. And now, Arkansas River Rice is out there, the first Black-owned rice mill in the country out there in Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. So all of that, just a number and similar opportunities that I've had the chance to work on. So I'm excited, and I've had a broad experience, and that's what I bring now to our community within the church. I believe the Lord has prepared me for just that, to be able to respond to the opportunities that the church has and can really run into.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm so you said a whole lot, Reverend Loxley, and we're gonna slow walk some of it because you said a whole lot. You jumped over a whole lot. So Reverend Loxley O'Connor is, again, like I said, a friend, a mentor. I'm super honored that he's on. But he's the CFO here. Shout out to our senior pastor, Matthew Watley. But he's the CFO at Kingdom, but he was also the CFO at Reed Temple. I don't think there's anybody that I speak more to about finances and my finances than Reverend Loxley O'Connor. My wife and I trust Reverend Lox, but he said something early on that I want you to hear. He said that he started in the laundromat business, and I know this story, so I ask you to share about it. But he was going to upgrade his house, but he made a pivot from upgrading his house to deciding to use those funds to make it an investment in the laundromat business, which then blessed him in other ways. And I'm going to ask him about, because I've seen him be true what the Bible says, an inheritance for your children's children. But can we go back just real quick? Because that opportunity, right? Many people wouldn't take that opportunity to invest in their upgrade, which means they had to stay where they were. But they decided to face it into a laundromat. Talk us through, those who are watching, those who are listening, whether they're clergy, whether they're not. But what did that moment feel like? What were the prompting that you and your wife, shout out Auntie Denise, what was that season like? Because I can only imagine it. You've told me the story a little bit, but I want you to share just with those who are listening, because that I think is a key pivot that the Lord allowed you all to make.
Yeah, that was really interesting, and it's so interesting, Earth, in the fact that we had only owned our first house, for 3 years at the
Wow.
time, and being an accountant, the CPA, and all of that, I saw the opportunity to use equity in our house and do a move up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember sitting with Denise and saying, "Babe, we can do this." I was in a library. We had gone to New York to visit my mother-in-law, excuse me, and I was in the library reading through all of the stuff, making sure I got it all straight because I was going to convince her, as how we could do this.
Yeah.
So I got to her and I convinced her we could do the move up, and we went looking and we found the house we wanted, and we started contracting. It was to be built too. It was a brand new house. So
Wow.
I've convinced her, and now we're in the process, and we're looking, and we're talking design and so forth. And the agent that I was working with came to me and said, and this is how the Lord really, it's the Lord who brings you and causes you to will and do according to his good pleasure. So he comes to me and he says, man, you're CPA and so forth. I walked into a place and I have this opportunity to buy a laundromat. I want you to analyze it for me and tell me what you think.
Mm.
And I looked at it, and it was losing over 100,000 a year. And I want you to hear, it
Wow.
was losing over
Wow.
100,000 a year. But my analysis identified what I believed were the clear opportunities for it to be profitable, right? Because it had been profitable before. And in
Yeah.
fact, Denise and I had used the very same laundromat before, right? So
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay. Okay.
we knew the place. We actually knew the place, right? So I shared with him, man, this is what da 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 da, and he came back and he said, man, I'm not interested. I'm making that already. There's no reason for me to pick up a loss leader and try to turn it. I'm not bothered. And I said, if you're not, and he's the agent on the deal I'm doing. I
Hmm.
said, if you're not, I would actually prefer to do that than buy the house, right? And he said,
Wow.
really? I said, yeah. And he said, that's interesting. He said, hold on. So a couple of days later, he came back and he said, I am now the listing agent for the laundromat. You can make an offer. Because he wasn't gonna lose, he was gonna lose a commission. So you
Yeah.
cannot make an offer, right? And so having already done the analysis, we made an offer. And we made the offer. And a few days later, he called me one Saturday morning and he said, look, the owner wants to talk to you. And I got a call. So he gave me the number. I called this guy who was all the way in Minneapolis, right?
Wow.
And the guy and I had a conversation. I had used all of the knowledge I had, writing all these clauses, contingency into the contract. And the guy calls me and he says, "Listen, man, um, let's cut through all of this. Let's agree on a price. Forget all of this contingencies and stuff. What's the cash price you will pay?
Mm.
All right, said and done. Period. You're offering me this price, and you'll pay it regardless." Um, and so I made him an offer, which was, of course, discounted.
Yeah.
And he said, "Fine." The problem with that was that I made him an offer that at that point I had no money other than the equity in my house. So for me to have moved up, I needed to sell my house and use that equity to buy the new house.
Wow.
If I'm not
Yeah.
selling my house, I don't have the equity that's in my house,
Mm.
right? So when I
Yeah.
say that to the agent, again, now God was working. He said, hold on. And he went to his own mother and said, look, would you give this guy a loan and we'll write it, attach it to his house, right? So you won't have to leave the house, but it will be a second trust against my house. So I borrowed the equity in my house.
Wow.
And at that point, I was sure that was 50% of the cash I needed to close, right?
Wow.
And the Lord found me a person I'd never met, but 2 weeks before I did the deal. A Caucasian brother I was working with on a project who overheard me pivoting to people and nobody would pitching to people and nobody would take this deal. and he
Yeah.
took the deal as a junk, as what he called a junk investment, junk bond. It sounded to him crazy, crazy as all outdoor. But if I wanted
Yeah.
to, he lend me the money, and if I could return it, so be it. For him, it was what he could lose if it never worked. To
Wow.
me, it was everything, and that's
Wow.
how we bought it. And the first night when we sat back and looked at what the Lord had done, it just blew our minds, and we really
Wow.
have never turned back since, because
That is that.
now
Yeah.
we're 30 years, 31 years, and still counting in that business. And
That is great.
I actually sold that store and a property. I'll tell you all, we ended up buying the store. As I said, it was losing for 50,000. We sold the thing combined for 1.7 million.
Jeez. Praise the Lord. That is, yeah, that is, see that, but you didn't see the 1 point whatever million. You just saw the opportunity. And I think that's what I wanted people to hear. I didn't even know that you and Denise frequented the store and knew the store.
Mhm.
But that's, but if you're going to pivot, because sometimes I think we think, financially you got to have all of this stuff. But I think it's the crux of what the Lord said to me when he said do ministry pivot. I've said this before. It's the story of Moses, right? It's literally Moses talking to the Lord, and the Lord is telling Moses, I need you to do this thing. And Moses is like, yo, how?
Yeah.
And God is like, what's in your hand, bro? Like,
Right.
what do you already have that you're discounting? That if you give it to me, I'm going to make it what you can't imagine. And I
Right.
think that's, and we've spoken and you said it, 31 years in that business is wild. You've had several laundromats, and that has been the jump point for other things. You and I talk often, and so we'll send articles. You'll send me several financial articles. I'll send you one or two, and always looking at people doing big business.
Mhm.
But literally, those who are doing big business started off with a small one.
And that's why we're told, don't despise small beginnings, right?
Amen.
You got to
Amen.
make the move, trust the Lord, right? Because He knows the plans He has for us. There's
Yeah.
no way I could have seen what we saw, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to see where it has gone, to see what it still does, right? Because
Yeah.
because I can tell you that as we sit here, I am clear what my certainly if the as the Lord continues to allow, I'm clear on my retirement plan.
Yeah.
I'm clear on that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But never would have known that when we made that move, and we continue to live and be content and satisfied in the house another 16 years. So we never
Wow.
moved again,
Yeah.
right? From that
Yeah.
point, by the
Yeah.
time we moved, it was a total of 16 years we lived in the house.
Wow.
So sometimes we've got to check out ourselves and say, now, why are you doing what you're doing? Aren't you just trying to keep up with the Joneses and so forth? And I think it applies to church too,
Yeah.
because because as you come into this year, I think every church when it comes into this year, you're not. If you take the time, it's now March, end of
Yep.
March. So
Yep.
every church has seen what the first 3 months are bringing.
Yep.
Regardless
Easily.
of
Yep.
what's happening out there, every church now needs to stop and kind of take a real look at how the first 3 months of the year has gone.
Yeah.
Make an assessment, an analysis. What
Yeah.
are the opportunities we're seeing? What are the trends we are seeing? What is working? What has begun to work? What do we have a sense as how the Lord is moving in our midst?
Hmm.
Right? Because at the end of the day, all we have to do is to align ourselves to the will of God, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
He'll cause us, as I said, to will and do according to His plan. He knows what He will provide. Okay,
Yeah.
so every church and the leadership of churches prayerfully are stopping and assessing, what are we already seeing? Are we seeing people coming back in the building? Right?
Hmm.
Are
Yeah.
we seeing people still staying online? Are we
Mm-hmm.
seeing people wanting certain kinds of ministries more than the other? Are we
Yeah.
seeing trends in the way people are giving?
Mm-hmm.
Right? All of those are the kinds of analysis that every one of us must be doing, not only
Yeah.
in church but in our own lives,
That's
right?
good. Yeah.
And when you do that, you begin to really hone in on kind of the what's next. Where should I be concentrating? As you know, we're talking a lot about to our congregation about multiple streams of income. You
Yep.
know, because there's what you can cut, but there's also there's only so much you can cut.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not that we're trying to tell everybody to work harder. It's just we're saying work smarter, figure out those things you can do, the opportunities that are yours, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and how you begin to move it, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, that's great, and I think I'm gonna ask you in a minute because one of the things that we want to talk about are the things that churches and people should consider. So I think one of them, when you talked about, is the trends, and there may be a couple others. But I want to slow walk so the laundromats. I know one of the things, and you said it also, is your interest, but also your investment in
Mhm,
real estate. I remember twice Reverend Loxley calls me and he calls me, gives me an address to meet him. And so Reverend Locke, so I'm going to meet him wherever he asks me to meet him. And I meet him at an address, and I remember him talking about like, yeah, it's going to be a bedroom over here, or this is going to be over here. And I didn't realize, and it's addresses that Reverend Loxley owned real estate wise, and now was at the place where he was able to help his daughters to be able to have their homes and what they're gonna stay in. And I remember that, and I think I shared it with you, and I'm saying it publicly, but it was super dope for me from a single parent. Mom did an amazing job, but to see that level of not money, but wealth, right? Like I'm transitioning wealth to start somebody off. Because I know I was the second one in my family line to own a home, right? My wife and I did that. Like, but there's generations and nobody did it. Everybody lived in the projects. So to meet someone who knew enough and had a conversation enough to say, I'm going to set my daughters up so that they can now own a space that they can get into. I think I want you to kind of unpack that a little bit because for me it was one of the pivotal moments in my life, kind of seeing you do it, and you did it twice. Like you called me one time and it was like okay, and you called me again, and it was time in between y'all, but
mhm.
it was just the way. And I don't know if you were doing it intentionally. I never asked you that, but I know for me it was helpful because I was able to see that this is the roadmap, right? Not looking at the Joneses and trying to upgrade myself, but making sure my children's children are good. So I'm gonna pause and let you reflect on that. But that was super dope for me.
Well, this question you just the and the passage you just referred to, the Bible says, good parents, leave
Yeah,
an inheritance for their children's children.
yeah,
So here's the irony. What you saw was us. We had when we bought that first laundromat. That I
uh
started
huh,
putting scriptures and the murals on the front because the actual building was a former car dealership. So that those big glass things, right?
okay, yeah,
So we
yeah,
were
yeah,
putting scriptures is right on Route One, and people would pass and they would be seeing scriptures on this place, right?
okay,
And nobody knew what it was, so most people came in and to ask, "What was this?" Right? So that's what was going on. But it's just what the Lord placed on our heart. So we were doing a Christmas mural,
mm-hmm,
and as the guy was there designing, writing and decorating it, and with a Christmas scene and so forth,
mm-hmm,
I asked him to put a church, and he framed out a church, and I said, put a home close to
mm-hmm,
the church, and so he put a home close to the church, and I said, right on, that's home, and then
yeah,
it hit me, and I said, put three houses next door. Just put in three. And he said, why is that? And I said, that's a house for each of my daughters, right? And in that moment, it was birthed in me that that's what I should be doing, right?
Yeah.
Investing in their future, right?
Yeah.
As it unfolded, what I realized, I really wasn't just investing in their future, I was investing in their kids' future, right? Because while it would be theirs, I knew we'd prepare them in such a way that this would just be a starter, as you
Yeah.
said, and
Yeah.
and they would do even more, and they could still pass even this one on
That's
to their
good.
kids, right?
Yeah.
And so we started taking resources again. The main challenge, and you heard me say it before, we then lived in our house for 16 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
the idea was not that our investment turned, it's making money, and now we then went back to trying to keep up with the Joneses. It was that
Yeah.
we then turned that money into different things, and you built,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
started investing in residential real estate. We bought residential real estate. We bought the building that owned that we were renting for the laundromat, and that's how we started just multiplying, building and multiplying, on that talent that the Lord had given us, that one amount, and He keep growing it. Okay,
Got it.
and
Yeah.
so what you saw was as they became of age, instead of my daughters going to go to, first of all, for us, we believe you had to put the kids out into the world and let them begin to experience it, you know.
Uh-huh.
So that was part of how we thought about life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but instead of them having to go hassle with somebody else's place and pay somebody else's rent, that they would then that and pay off their property, they
Yeah.
basically moved into theirs,
That's
right?
great.
And
Yeah.
paid off theirs and learned what it was to
Yeah.
become a homeowner early,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of start, from just how we saw it and thought it was what we could do, and as that would be very helpful,
Yeah.
and foundational to their own financial life. And
Yeah.
it's been a blessing, absolute blessing. And my oldest has moved from that property, didn't sell it, so now it's rented, and she's moved
Mm.
somewhere else. So it's
Yeah.
that situation.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think it's an awesome teaching principle of the maintaining where you are, realizing what you have, and being able to leverage what you have for what God has next, right? Being able to pivot those things. Now, you said a lot of stuff. Maybe we'll have to do another one. You were already on one of the pivots. I'm gonna throw it in the show note, the one that you were on before, and all of the stuff that you listed too. But I think God has uniquely gifted you, Rev, and you know this because anybody who I trust or who I know and want to see them do well financially, which is everybody, but I'll bump into pastors and leaders, and I'll call you, say, hey, I gave so and so your number.
Right.
Because they asked me some stuff outside of coaching and teaching that I can't fool with. But I said, there's one name you need. That's Reverend Loxley O'Connor.
Right.
And you've blessed them when the whole PPPE loan, whatever that thing is, came out. You had a whole thing on it. So, and I'm gonna link that in the show notes too, y'all. The website he has on it with the stuff that outlines the helpful, and we're doing stuff now at our church that you heard him say with the streams of income. I'm gonna link some of that too. But I want to because I know the algorithm, and I don't know the time frame. People are going to start to tap out in a minute. I want. Can you help us with what are the things? What are the keys? What are the points? What are the thoughts that churches as well as people need to consider financially in this financial climate? Earlier, you talked about trends, and so I wrote that down. That'll be in the show notes. But what do we need to think through? What do we need to consider? Are there pivots we need to make? What are the things that you would outline for churches, for leaders, again, but also for lay people, to really think through financially as we go through this climate where the market is doing its own thing, job layoffs are happening. What are the things from where you sit that we should take advantage of or be able to assess?
And that's a great question, man. And I think the place I would first start is to say it's like everything else. You got to examine yourself, whether
That's
it's a
good.
church or the individual. You've got to be able to have a proper assessment of who you are, or whether again church or individual.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things happening in the economy, but everything doesn't affect everybody.
Okay.
uh, there is the general impact of inflation, but not every aspect of inflation is relevant to some. So, for example, if you were somebody who had made the decision and the choices of refinancing a mortgage or so forth, and you have that wonderful 2 to 3% mortgage that you have now, right?
Yeah.
Then all of this stuff about interest rates going up is not your issue.
Yep.
Only issue it's doing is checking your desire to move up too quickly, and perhaps too quickly. And maybe that is actually a blessing to you, because now you get the chance to hold on to the cash you have and consider what is the better investment opportunity. Was it
Hmm.
really just to move up and put all of your money into a larger home, or is this the time now that, again, as we're talking about, you're looking at multiple streams of income? What other
That's good.
things can I be investing in?
Yeah.
How can I identify the kind of business or opportunity that is needed, that is wanted? There are many opportunities, a bunch of businesses that you can start, that is even just online businesses, right? And I think you
Hmm.
can search it out. We're going to present those in our multiple streams of income. We're going to show people. I have a listing of 15 online businesses you can do purely on online, and in as part time, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there are things you can do. Maybe you could just have taken that money that you were going to put on another thing, and here it is now, where you make the true analysis of, if I bought this piece of real estate, can I invest as the prices you know adjust or stabilize,
Yeah. Hmm.
and rent, and what kinds of, how will that turn out for me? So it's a term that we say is, a prudent person acts according to knowledge. It's
That's
time
good.
now that you really examine, look at the opportunities that are really yours. Same for the church. A church needs to begin to ask itself, where do we stand in this community? What are the
Hmm.
needs that community has?
Yeah.
Right? And how do we as a church begin to look for the kinds of, and organize around how we will serve our community, right?
Yeah.
The COVID told us that staying inside and being locked in is not what church is about.
Hmm.
Church is
Yeah.
church is to impact its community. All of the stuff we've been watching about the Black church and the history of the Black church points to how the church was integral to the community. And so here we get that opportunity to really do that. And again, building on that, I think it's also that the church has a responsibility. Second thing it could be doing, beyond looking outside and how it can help,
Uh
is
huh.
is to be generating a culture of generosity in its own church. How do
That's
you
good.
do that? Is by you helping people to steward their resources and think outside of the box better, to do what Ecclesiastes did say, you know,
Yeah.
invest in 7 ventures, even 8, because you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to come. We are the church. People outside are using what the church, what the scripture said, and act like it came from the world. It didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what was
Yeah.
written thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
our word. Let's bring the word and make the word alive to our congregation and help them, right? So so the church has to look at the trends and be clear on where it's going, what
Yeah.
pivots need to be made in ministry and so forth. Look at its community and say, hey, where are we needed? How can we do better, right? and serve our community and use our resources more effectively. And that's both human and capital, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
thirdly, serve those in our church and make them better stewards over what they have so that we can create the culture of generosity within our congregation. I think
Yeah.
those three primary things, if we really stop and focus in on them, right?
Yeah.
That's what churches should really be about at
Yeah.
this point in time.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Rev, and we're gonna outline them in the show notes. Also, again, big shout out to our pastor, Pastor Watley, at Kingdom, because the classes that Reverend Loxley is talking about are gonna be a part of our life groups, and maybe at this point when this finally drops, will already have been out, but I'll link them in the show notes, and then. I forgot to mention our TKN, our Kingdom Leadership Network that
Right?
Reverend Loxley serves on and shares with. And if you are a leader, church leader, or associate leader, or just not just, but a lay member, you want to be a part of it, I'll link that too because he shares some of these in there. But I'm excited about those 7 streams. I know Reverend Locke and I talk all the time about opportunities and ways that God has blessed us to do not just what we do at church, but also what you do outside. He talked about the rice mill. He talked about the other ventures that he has. And I know for me with the books and the speaking and the coaching, but having other opportunities where you can allow God to use you, but also allow God to use you to bless others, that will also be of financial benefit to you. So I think all of those are awesome, Rev. Before we close, I do want to ask you, for those who are watching, for those who are listening, what are maybe 1 or 2 books or resources that you would recommend that someone should read, someone should look up. Maybe it's a podcast someone should be listening to outside of Ministry Pivot. Shout out, but others that people should be looking to that may inspire them, help them in this season, but just really in general.
Well, for me, there's a whole lot of books out there that I think are just outstanding. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm gonna do something different, right?
Okay, all
I'm
right, we
gonna do
with it.
something different. I'm gonna suggest to people, right, that they begin to open themselves up to increasing from the finance side their own financial literacy,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
Which means they've got to tune in and stop tuning out when they start hearing finance being talked about in front of them. So what I mean is, in the whole social media world or on the news or whatever, conversations will come up, or you may hear that the Federal Reserve is meeting or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And what I find is too much of our community just shuts that out. That's
Yeah.
when we get up and go get a drink and da 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 da. And then you hear something come up that is all gossip, and it highlights a ball player, it highlights the life of somebody, some celebrity, and all of that. And our
Hmm.
ears are on, we're on edge, and we're absorbing that stuff.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
and and I'm suggesting to you that all that does is feed those things in us that cause us to really move away from purpose, plan, and goals in our lives, right? They're the
Good. That's good.
distractions. They're the
Yeah.
things that draw us away, right? From what it is that we really say we desire for ourselves. We've got to develop, and I'm saying this because at some point in my life, I remember when I said I wanted to buy real estate, I
Hmm.
actually I found the newspaper section, right? In what the other newspaper that was in Washington at the time, not the Washington Post, but the Washington Times, which was as right wing as whatever, but it had a real estate mailbag in it, and
Hmm.
we broke down everything you could do in real estate and how you answered those stuff, right? I read, I wasn't reading the rest of the articles, but I was reading that section, you know, consistently week over week and
Yeah, yeah,
gaining knowledge.
that's good.
You know, I know you can name any number of books and so forth, but all I'm
Yeah,
saying, there's a book where it's called Start with the Why. I
start
forgot
with
the
why. Yep.
right.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, I enjoy that book, right? You know, it's but at the end of the day, I'm saying those are motivational books, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
leadership books. There are a number of those, but you've got to start thinking about executing.
yeah,
And execution comes when you start really going after learning what's step one, what's step two in actually doing something. How do I purchase a piece of real estate? And what are the nuances of it? How do I buy what is involved in buying a laundromat, right?
hmm,
What are those steps? You know, because I believe everyone should try to actually own a business that produces cash, right?
yeah,
But then I also believe you should have passive investments,
yeah.
right?
That's good. Yeah,
So how do I do either? And those stuff are, you know, when I was doing the piece on the employee retention credit a couple years ago, this thing that everybody's selling now.
yeah.
When I found it reading it the night in the IRS, the first and only place I found it written about was in Forbes,
Wow.
right? And Forbes is not what we read generally.
Yeah, I was about to say you got to be reading Forbes. You got to be subscribed to Forbes.
You see what I'm saying? You got to
Yeah,
go look for it. And it
yeah,
was
yeah.
there that I actually saw articles where it was being spoken to those who were the last ones that actually needed that money,
Wow.
but
Yeah,
not in the general stuff we read.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
No, I
so
think I
so
think
that's
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 great.
what I don't want to. I don't want to, because I know depending on your schedules are, but those articles, I look for the new. I have different news things that I subscribe to, and,
Hmm.
and they alert me on financial articles.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going
yeah,
on with interest rate, who is buying what, so forth. That's what I go look and see how those are being structured,
yeah.
right? And when you start working on it, your own creativity will grow.
No, I think that's great. And I know I'll list the Forbes. I'll list. I know a couple New York Times articles you sent me, and we go back and forth on those. And Reverend Loxley, we're in a group. Reverend Locks and Pastor Watley and myself, we're in a group, and we send stuff all the time. But one of the things that I'm going to think is what I think what you're pushing us to is one of the books, Rev, that you told me about years ago, and I actually started giving the staff members when they come on board. Some of them have gotten it from me. I got to do better about getting more. But it's the book, out of the maze, the follow up to Who Stole My Cheese.
Please,
I'm
right,
gonna put that inside because really what he's saying is that like this is literally you need to think outside of you need to question all of your assumptions.
right.
And allow those things to push you forward. So I'm gonna list that too. But Reverend Loxley, thank you again for being on with us for Ministry Pivot. Super excited about all that God is doing in your life. Super excited about all that God has done and is going to do. And super know, well, I know that I've been blessed every time I talk with you, and prayerfully those who are watching, listening, also have been blessed. But thanks again for being a part of Ministry Pivot today.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, and thank you for the work you're doing because Ministry Pivot is one of those things I point people to and say you will learn a whole lot from what people are talking about and what they're saying on this. And so, thank you for really heeding what the Lord said and stepping out there, man. It's been a blessing.
Amen. Thanks, Rev.
All right, man.
Wasn't that a great episode with Reverend Loxley? I don't know about you, but I am encouraged. I am excited, and I am looking for the opportunities that God is allowing us to be able to pivot. I hope that you were encouraged by that episode and learned from Reverend Loxley. I learn from him all the time when I speak with him. I'm blessed to be able to talk with him daily, literally daily we talk. But I'm excited about it, and I hope that you are as well. Don't forget to download the show notes. Don't forget to like, to comment, to share, to subscribe. Don't forget to rate. That's how these episodes get lifted in the rotation. Super excited for all of those who are watching, not just in the DMV area, but literally across the globe. Thankful for you all watching Ministry Pivot. Looking forward to how God is calling you to pivot in this season, because remember, this is your season of opportunity. Speak soon. God bless.